Hi, today we are going to be learning how to read a chord chart, otherwise known as a chord diagram, for the ukulele. Reading a chord chart is extremely useful, especially for people who are teaching themselves or learning online, because once you can read a chord chart, you can teach yourself or learn how to play any chord that you want. As long as you know how to read the chord chart, then you will know where your fingers are supposed to go to make the right chord happen, which is really exciting and empowering for someone who's trying to learn from home. So let's get started. On a chord chart, you are going to see vertical lines, just like you would see on an actual ukulele. Okay, so you're gonna have 4 vertical lines on your chord chart, and these vertical lines represent the strings of the ukulele. Some of you might know the strings of the ukulele all have letter names that go along with them. The top string, when you're looking down at the instrument and playing position, the top string is called G string. The next string is C string. The next string is E string. And the bottom string is called A string. So we've got G, C, E, and A. All 4 of those strings are represented in the chord chart by the vertical lines. Now, if we look at the horizontal lines, those will represent the frets on the ukulele. So the line at the very top, on some chord charts, it's thicker than the other lines, and that's to differentiate between this piece here, which is not a fret, and these actual frets. So that's why the top line is sometimes thicker on certain chord charts. But your first fret actually starts here. So we've got 1st fret, 2nd fret, 3rd fret, and 4th fret. Most chord charts I've seen usually don't go past the 4th fret, because typically for most standard chords you don't need anything past the 4th fret. The next thing you might see on a chord chart is a dot. And the dot is a super important part on the chord chart because the dot is what tells you where to put your finger to play a certain chord. So if we were looking at a chord chart that had a dot here, then that means a finger needs to go here on the ukulele to make that chord. Okay, so here's a really super common chord called C chord. And the dot on C chord is, we can see on the bottom string, otherwise known as the A string, and it's on the 3rd fret. So we know that one of our fingers has to go here. Typically, C chord is played by ring finger, so that's why I have my ring finger there. On the dots of a chord chart, sometimes you might see numbers. Those numbers represent your fingers. So it tells you which finger to use to play that chord. So when you're holding the ukulele, your thumb goes on the back of the neck. We never use our thumb to play chords on the ukulele typically. We only use our other 4 fingers. So your thumb isn't going to get a number because it doesn't play chords. Your pointer finger or your index finger is your first finger, so that will be number 1. Your middle finger is number 2, ring finger is number 3, and pinky finger is number 4. So all 4 of these fingers that we use to play chords, each of them has their own number, and sometimes on certain chord charts you might see that number in a dot. That helps you know which finger to use to play that chord. I will note one more thing before we look at some chord charts. The dot that you see on chord charts is never right on top of a fret. It's always in between frets. That's because that's where your finger should go when you're playing an actual chord. Your finger should never go right on top of a fret. It should always go a little bit behind the fret. That's how you get the best sound out of your ukulele. Now let's look at some actual chord charts for 4 really common chords. We've already looked at C chord, so here's C chord in playing position. And if I turn my instrument vertically, it looks basically the same as the chord chart. The ukulele looks the same as the chord chart. Another really common chord is A minor chord. This is A minor chord in playing position. And if I turn my instrument vertically, this looks pretty much the same as the chord chart we see, right? The dot would go right here, and that's where the finger goes. Our 3rd chord we're gonna look at, F chord, looks like this in playing position. But again, if I turn my instrument vertically, the places where my 2 fingers are is where the dots are on the chord chart. So it corresponds with what you see in the chord chart. Let's look at one more really common chord. G7 chord looks like this in playing position. And if I turn my instrument vertically, the places where my 3 fingers are, that is where you find the dots in the chord chart. So the dots in the chord chart will exactly correlate with where your fingers should go on the fretboard of the ukulele, and that shows you and tells you how to play the chord. So now that you know how to read chord charts, also known as chord diagrams, I would recommend that you go learn some new ukulele chords. If you don't know the 4 common chords that I just listed, I would suggest trying to learn those first. But if you already know how to play those 4 chords, I would encourage you to go find a song that has new chords that you've never played before and try to teach yourself those chords by reading a chord chart. Thank you so much for watching and happy playing. Bye!